I arrived at Le Chateau, the most expensive restaurant in town, clutching a small blue gift bag that had cost me 3 days' worth of groceries. My mother's 60th birthday celebration was supposed to be special, and despite everything, I wanted to be there. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed down my dress, the nicest one I still owned after the divorce. The maitre d' led me to the private room where my family was already gathered, champagne flowing. When I stepped through the doorway, conversations stopped. My father, Gordon, looked up from his menu and pointed directly at me. "This guest doesn't belong anymore," he announced coldly. My cousins laughed. My sister Paige raised her glass. Finally, I smirked and said, "Then dinner's on your card." I walked out. 30 minutes later, the waitstaff came back with the bill. $3,200. Family has always been complicated for me. Growing up as Annabelle Wilson, later, Annabelle Carter, and now back to Annabelle Wilson again at 34 years old. I learned early that in my family, appearance mattered more than authenticity. My parents, particularly, Gordon, built a fortress of respectability around us. We were the picture-perfect family in our community. Successful business, beautiful home in the suburbs, 2 daughters who excelled in school. But inside those walls, the reality was much different. From my earliest memories, I was constantly compared to my younger sister Paige. Paige with her natural blonde curls that matched our mother's. Paige who was graceful at ballet while I preferred soccer. Paige who smiled for photos while I asked too many questions. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood, playing on repeat at every family gathering, school event, and dinner table conversation. "Annabelle is too loud," they would say. "Annabelle is too stubborn. Annabelle never knows when to let things go." By the time I was a teenager, I had internalized the message. I was the difficult one, the problem child, despite my good grades and lack of actual behavioral issues. I simply didn't fit the mold they had created. I escaped to college with relief, building a life for myself away from the constant criticism. I met Tyler during my senior year, and he seemed to appreciate exactly the things my family criticized: my directness, my passion, my unwillingness to settle. We married 2 years after graduation, and for a while I thought I had finally found my place, my own family. The divorce blindsided me. After 7 years of marriage, I discovered Tyler was having an affair with my best friend Sarah. The betrayal cut deep from both sides. My husband and my closest friend, the 2 people I trusted most. The pain was excruciating, but the humiliation was worse. I later learned they had been seeing each other for over a year. When I called my mother to tell her about the separation, her first response wasn't concern for my well-being, but worry about what people would say. "What did you do?" she asked immediately, as if the affair must have been my fault. My father was more direct. "I always knew you'd drive him away eventually." The divorce drained me emotionally and financially. Tyler fought for everything despite being the one who cheated. The legal fees alone wiped out most of my savings, and I had to downsize from our beautiful brownstone to a tiny 1-bedroom apartment. I took a pay cut to move from my corporate marketing job to a smaller firm that offered more flexibility as I tried to put my life back together. Through it all, my family made it clear they thought I had failed. My sister Paige, now married to a successful surgeon with 2 perfect children and an Instagram account full of their seemingly perfect life, would call with thinly veiled pity that felt more like gloating. My mother would sigh heavily during our increasingly rare phone conversations, mentioning how she ran into Tyler and Sarah and how happy they looked. So when the invitation came for my mother's 60th birthday dinner, I almost threw it away. It was clearly sent out of obligation rather than desire to have me there. But something in me, that stubborn hope that never quite dies, thought maybe this could be a chance to reconnect, to start rebuilding some kind of relationship with my family. I spent money I couldn't really afford on a silver bracelet for my mother, had my hair done for the first time in months, and wore the one designer dress I'd kept from my previous life. I arrived 10 minutes late, intentionally hoping to slip in quietly and avoid the prolonged awkwardness of small talk before dinner. Instead, I walked into an ambush that ended with me walking out, and the family stuck with a $3,200 bill that Gordon had apparently expected me to pay as some sort of penance for existing. As I sat in my car in the parking lot, my phone buzzed repeatedly with increasingly angry text messages. "How dare you leave us with this bill from Paige? You've ruined your mother's birthday from my Uncle Ted. Get back here now and fix this from Gordon. I turned my phone to silent and rested my forehead against the steering wheel, trying to breathe through the familiar tightness in my chest. I thought I was prepared for their coldness, but the public humiliation was a new low. This guest doesn't belong anymore. The words echoed in my mind, cutting deeper with each repetition. The worst part wasn't that Gordon had said it. It was that everyone else had agreed. I couldn't bring myself to drive away completely. Instead, I parked at a coffee shop about a block from Le Chateau, ordered a large black coffee, and sat at a corner table trying to process what had just happened. The anger came in waves, followed by hurt, then embarrassment, then back to anger again. The evening had been a disaster from the moment I arrived. I'd entered the private dining room to find an elaborate setup that screamed excess: crystal glassware, fine china, floral arrangements that must have cost a fortune. 4 bottles of Dom Perignon were already open, and I noticed cards at each place setting with what appeared to be a 5-course meal pre-selected for each guest. Gordon had clearly spared no expense for his wife's birthday, except apparently when it came to including her daughter. The seating arrangement had been the first clue that something was off. Everyone had assigned seats with elegant name cards, but there wasn't one for me. My mother had barely met my eyes when I entered, offering a stiff cheek for me to kiss while continuing her conversation with my aunt. Paige had looked me up and down before commenting, "Oh, that dress. I think I remember when that style was in fashion." One of my cousins had asked loudly about the divorce situation, as if it were a mildly interesting news item rather than my personal trauma. I'd been trying to find a seat, any seat, when Gordon had made his announcement. Looking back, the whole thing felt choreographed, as if they'd been waiting for the right moment to humiliate me. Gordon had never been my biological father, something he never let me forget. He married my mother when I was 10 years old, after my real dad disappeared from our lives. From the beginning, Gordon made it clear that he saw me as an unfortunate attachment to my mother, while Paige, born 2 years after their marriage, was his true daughter. He adopted me legally for appearance's sake, but emotionally I was always the outsider. What hurt most about tonight wasn't Gordon's cruelty. I was used to that. It was my mother's silence. Linda Wilson Carter, who had once been my protector, sat there and said nothing as her husband publicly disowned me. She didn't defend me, didn't call after me when I left. Her silence was a confirmation of what I'd suspected for years. I had lost her to Gordon's influence long ago. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was my cousin Jake. I hesitated before answering, expecting more abuse. But Jake had always been the most decent member of the extended family. "Annabelle, where are you?" His voice sounded strained rather than angry. "At a coffee shop down the street. Why did Gordon send you to track me down and drag me back to pay the bill?" "No, listen, things are crazy here. Gordon is threatening to sue the restaurant for allowing you to leave without paying. He's making a scene, and Aunt Linda is crying, and Paige is having some kind of meltdown about her ruined Instagram moment or something." Despite everything, I felt a small flicker of satisfaction. "Not my problem, Jake. Look, I know it's not. What they did was terrible. But there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you a long time ago." My stomach tightened. "What are you talking about? Can I meet you? Where you are, I need to show you something, and it can't wait anymore." 20 minutes later, Jake slid into the seat across from me, looking nervous. At 32, he was closest to me in age among the cousins and had always been kind to me, though we weren't particularly close. He placed a manila envelope on the table between us. "What's this?" I asked. "Letters. From your biological father." My heart seemed to stop for a moment. "My father, Michael." Jake nodded grimly. "They've been coming for years." Gordon intercepted them. "He made everyone promise not to tell you." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were at least a dozen letters dating back over 15 years. The most recent was postmarked just 3 months ago. "How did you get these?" "Gordon keeps them in his home office. I found them by accident years ago when I was looking for some business documents." I should have told you then, but Gordon threatened to cut off college funding for my sister if I said anything. I was 19 and scared. Why tell me now?" Jake looked down at his coffee. Because what happened tonight was the last straw. They've been systematically cutting you out of family affairs for years. Did you know you weren't invited to Thanksgiving last year? Gordon told everyone you declined. I hadn't been invited at all. The realization of how deliberately I'd been isolated hit me hard. There's more, Jake continued. Gordon has been financially controlling everyone, including Paige, though she doesn't realize it. He holds the purse strings and makes sure everyone knows it. And Annabelle. He encouraged Tyler to divorce you. What? How do you know that? Tyler's law firm was looking to partner with Carter Enterprises. Gordon made it clear the partnership would be more likely if Tyler were unencumbered by a Wilson. The betrayal stole my breath. My own stepfather had orchestrated the destruction of my marriage for business advantages. I grabbed my phone and texted my mother. Did you know what Gordon did with Tyler? Her response came quickly. It's complicated, Annabelle. Gordon was trying to protect the business. I showed Jake the text. She knew. She's known all along. Jake looked pained. There's one more thing you need to know. Gordon has been embezzling from Carter Enterprises for years. The company you're technically still a part owner of through your grandmother's trust. Before I could process this new information, Jake's phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, then held it out to me with wide eyes. It's for you, he said. It's Michael, your father. Hello. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Annabelle, is that really you? The voice on the other end was deep, slightly raspy with age, but somehow familiar in a way that made my chest ache. It's Michael. Your dad. I hadn't heard his voice in 24 years. I was 10 when he vanished from my life, leaving a void that Gordon had filled with resentment rather than love. Why? It was the only word I could manage, encompassing decades of hurt and confusion. Why did you leave? Why didn't you fight for me? Why now? I never wanted to leave you, Annabelle. Never. His voice broke. Gordon threatened me with legal action, claimed he had evidence I was unfit as a father. He had resources I couldn't match, and political connections I couldn't fight. You could have tried. I whispered, tears forming despite my best efforts. I did try. For years. I sent letters, child support, birthday gifts. Later, I sent money for college graduation presents. Gordon returned the money, kept the gifts, and threatened restraining orders if I persisted. I looked at the pile of letters on the table. The tangible evidence of a father who hadn't abandoned me willingly hit me harder than I expected. Jake tells me you've been having a rough time, Michael continued. I've been following your career as best I could from a distance. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished, Annabelle. The simple praise, something I'd rarely heard from Gordon or even my mother, broke something open inside me. I found myself telling Michael everything. The divorce, the financial struggles, tonight's humiliation. I'm at the Marriott downtown, he said when I finished. I flew in hoping to finally see you. Jake has been helping me. Could we meet tonight? An hour later, I was sitting across from my biological father in his hotel room. Michael Wilson had aged well, his dark hair now silver at the temples, but his blue eyes, my eyes, still bright and clear. He showed me photos he'd kept of me growing up. School pictures he'd somehow obtained, newspaper clippings of academic awards. Even a few distant shots taken at my high school graduation and college commencement. I was there, he said, pointing to the commencement photo. In the back. I just needed to see you, even if you couldn't see me. The thought of him sitting alone at these milestone events, watching from afar while Gordon stood in his rightful place beside me, was almost unbearable. Gordon told me you didn't want anything to do with me, I said. That you had a new family and didn't want the complication. Michael's face hardened. I never remarried, never had other children. There has always been a room for you in my home waiting. Gordon made sure you believed the worst of me so you wouldn't look for me. As we talked, memories began to surface. Fishing trips with my dad before Gordon being carried on his shoulders at the state fair, him teaching me to ride a bike in the park near our old house. Happy memories Gordon had tried to erase. What do we do now? I asked, finally. Michael smiled gently. That depends on what you want, Annabelle. But if you're asking my opinion, I think it's time to stop letting Gordon Carter dictate the terms of your life. Jake had been texting updates from the restaurant. Gordon was still making a scene. The manager was threatening to call the police, and my mother was sitting silently while Paige alternated between crying and taking angry selfies for her private Instagram account. "I think we should go back there," I said suddenly. "Are you sure?" Michael asked. "You don't owe them anything. I'm not going back for them. I'm going back for me. I've spent too many years walking away when things got uncomfortable. It's time to stand my ground." When Michael, Jake, and I walked back into Le Chateau's private room, the chaos was exactly as Jake had described. Gordon was red-faced, jabbing his finger into the chest of the restaurant manager. Paige was furiously typing on her phone. My mother sat with an untouched glass of champagne, staring at nothing. "I'll pay for my portion," I announced loudly. "Nothing more." Gordon whirled around. You did this deliberately to embarrass us." "No, Gordon. You did that all by yourself when you pointed at me and declared I didn't belong." Gordon's eyes narrowed as he noticed Michael standing beside me. "What is he doing here? Did you orchestrate this whole thing as some pathetic revenge fantasy?" Before I could answer, my mother spoke up, her voice trembling but clear. "Michael, is that really you?" Something in her tone made me look at her more closely. There was recognition there, yes, but something else too. Guilt, maybe even fear. "Hello, Linda," Michael said coolly. "It's been a long time. You have no right to be here," Gordon hissed. "This is a private family event. Since when is Annabelle's father not family?" Jake challenged. "He signed away his rights when he left," Gordon shouted. "I never signed anything," Michael replied calmly. "And I never left willingly, as you well know." My mother stood up suddenly. "I think I'd like to go home now." "Linda," I said, "did you know about the letters? About Michael trying to contact me all these years?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Annabelle, you don't understand. It was complicated." "Actually, I think I'm finally starting to understand perfectly," I replied. "Gordon, I'm curious. When you got the pre-authorization for tonight's dinner on your card, did you use your personal account or the business one? Because according to Jake, you've been blurring those lines for years." Gordon's face went pale. "Whatever lies Jake has been telling you, they're not lies," my sister Paige interrupted unexpectedly. All eyes turned to her. "I found the documents in your study last month. You've been using company money for personal expenses for years." I just didn't know what to do about it. The admission from the golden child stunned Gordon into silence. The restaurant manager, who had been watching this family drama unfold with professional detachment, cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, we still need to resolve the bill situation." Michael stepped forward. "I'll cover my daughter's portion. The rest is up to them." As we prepared to leave, my mother caught my arm. "Annabelle, please. We need to talk." "Not tonight, Mom. I've had enough family time for one evening." Outside, Michael insisted on driving me home, promising to bring Jake back to get my car in the morning. As we pulled away, my phone rang with a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Annabelle Wilson?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Tracy from First National Bank. I'm calling about some concerns with your recent loan application." "I haven't applied for any loans," I said, confused. "Well, someone using your social security number and childhood address has applied for several in the past month. Given the amount and frequency, it triggered our fraud alert." I met Michael's concerned gaze across the car. "When did these applications start?" "The first one was processed about 3 weeks ago, right after a large withdrawal was made from a business account connected to Carter Enterprises." Ice formed in my stomach as the pieces clicked into place. Gordon wasn't just embezzling from the company. He was using my identity to cover his tracks. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity despite having barely slept. Michael had dropped me off with promises to meet for breakfast, and I'd spent hours going through the letters he'd written over the years. Each one revealed a father who had never stopped loving me, never stopped trying to reach me. Over coffee and eggs at a diner near my apartment, Michael filled in more gaps in my understanding. After my mother married Gordon, she had gradually cut off contact with Michael, eventually moving us to a new address without forwarding information. Gordon had used his considerable influence to make it difficult for Michael to find us. And when he finally did, the threats began. He claimed he had evidence that would paint me as dangerous, unstable, Michael explained. He threatened to use it to get a restraining order that would permanently prevent me from seeing you. Did such evidence exist? I asked. Michael shook his head. No, but Gordon had connections with local judges, law enforcement. In that social circle, his word would have been enough. I was a middle school teacher, with limited resources. I couldn't fight him in court, so you sent letters instead, and money whenever I could. I set up a trust for you that matured when you turned 21. You never received it. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Around that time, Gordon had suddenly offered to invest my savings from my first job out of college. The money had supposedly gone into a family investment account that I'd never seen documentation for despite requesting it multiple times. Gordon's been stealing from me my whole life, I realized aloud. My phone rang. It was Jake. Annabelle, where are you? You need to get to the main office. There's an emergency board meeting of Carter Enterprises in an hour, Gordon called it. Why would I need to be there? I don't work for the company. But you own 20% of it, Jake reminded me. Through your grandmother's trust. You're a voting member of the board, even if Gordon's been pretending otherwise for years. After a hurried goodbye to Michael, who promised to be available if I needed him, I rushed to change into my most professional outfit, a navy blue suit I'd kept from my corporate days. The Carter Enterprises headquarters occupied 3 floors of a downtown office building, a place I'd visited only a handful of times despite my theoretical stake in the business. At the reception desk, I was initially told there was no meeting I could attend. I'm Annabelle Wilson, granddaughter of Martha Wilson, who founded this company with Herbert Carter. I own 20% of the shares through the Wilson Family Trust, and I'm here for the board meeting. The receptionist's eyes widened. After a flurry of phone calls, I was escorted to the top floor conference room, where 7 people sat around a massive table. Gordon at the head looked up in shock when I entered. What is she doing here? He demanded, of no one in particular. The divorce blindsided me. After 7 years of marriage, I discovered Tyler was having an affair with my best friend Sarah. The betrayal cut deep from both sides. My husband and my closest friend, the 2 people I trusted most. The pain was excruciating, but the humiliation was worse. I later learned they had been seeing each other for over a year. She transferred her shares to me years ago, Gordon insisted. Actually, Susan said, sliding a folder across the table, our records show no such transfer was ever completed. The paperwork was drawn up, but never filed with the state. Legally, Miss Wilson still holds the shares her grandmother left her. For the next hour, I sat silently as the board discussed quarterly reports and business strategies, absorbing information about a company I should have been involved with all along. Gordon kept shooting venomous glances my way, but I held my ground. After the meeting, Susan asked me to stay behind. I've been wondering when you'd finally show up, she said once we were alone. Your grandmother would be pleased. She always said you had the Wilson business sense. I didn't know I was still a shareholder, I admitted. Gordon led me to believe I'd signed over my rights years ago. Susan's expression hardened. Gordon has led many people to believe many things over the years. Things that aren't necessarily true. Like what? Like the company's financial health, for one. We should talk privately, not here. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? As I left the building, my phone rang. It was my mother. Annabelle, we need to talk. Can I come over to your apartment? I hesitated, still raw from her silence the night before. Why now, Mom? Because I've been wrong. So wrong. Please just let me explain. 2 hours later, my mother sat across from me in my small living room, looking out of place in her expensive clothes. She'd aged overnight, the lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered. I don't know where to start, she said finally. How about with why you let Gordon treat me like an outsider all these years? She flinched but nodded. I was weak. I convinced myself it was better to keep the peace than to stand up to him. Gordon. He has a way of making you believe his version of reality. Did you know he was keeping Michael's letters from me? She nodded miserably. At first, Gordon said it was to protect you from false hopes. Michael had been inconsistent before disappearing for weeks for work. Gordon convinced me a clean break would be less painful in the long run. And later, when I was an adult, by then the lie had gone on so long I didn't know how to undo it. She wrung her hands in her lap. I've been unhappy for years, Annabelle. But I was afraid to leave. Afraid of what? Gordon controls everything. The money, the house, my relationships with friends. He's isolated me just like he isolated you. For the first time I looked at my mother not as the woman who had failed to protect me, but as another of Gordon's victims. It didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me understand them. I've been gathering evidence. She continued, reaching for her purse. She pulled out a USB drive. Bank statements, transfers, conversations I've recorded. Gordon doesn't know. I've been planning to leave for months, but I needed proof of what he's been doing first. Why show me now? Because last night when I saw how he treated you, how I let him treat you, I realized I couldn't wait any longer. And then seeing Michael, her voice broke. I loved him once, you know, before Gordon. He was kind and gentle with you, with both of us. Then why did you choose Gordon? Security, stability. Gordon promised things Michael couldn't. Financial security, social standing. I was a single mother afraid of struggling. It seemed like the sensible choice at the time. As she prepared to leave, my mother paused at the door. There's something else you should know. Gordon has been telling business associates that you're mentally unstable, that you can't be trusted with company information. He's been building a case against you for years. Cold anger washed over me. Why would he do that? Because he's always been afraid of you. Afraid you'd discover the truth about the company, about what he's been doing. You're too much like your grandmother. Too smart, too principled. After she left, I called a friend from my old firm who specialized in financial fraud. Then I called Michael. It was time to fight back. The next morning, I met with Susan Palmer at her private law office rather than at Carter Enterprises. She had brought stacks of financial documents and company records dating back 15 years. After your grandmother died, Gordon gradually consolidated power, Susan explained. Martha had structured the company with checks and balances. No single person was supposed to have complete control. But over time, Gordon removed anyone who questioned him and replaced them with allies. And no one stopped him. What about the board? The board has been largely ceremonial for years. Your mother holds 15% but has always voted with Gordon. Another 25% is split among minor shareholders who follow Gordon's lead. Your 20% could have made a difference, but I wasn't there, I finished. Exactly. And that's how Gordon has been able to use company funds for personal expenses, create shell companies to funnel money through, and generally treat the business as his personal ATM. Is the company in trouble? Susan sighed. Not yet, but it's heading there. Gordon has been taking increasingly risky moves to cover his tracks. That's why he's so desperate to get your shares or discredit you. He needs complete control to prevent anyone from looking too closely at the books. And the identity theft. Using my information for loans. That's new, Susan admitted. And dangerous. It suggests he's running out of options. Armed with information from Susan, my mother's evidence, and advice from my financial fraud specialist friend, I spent the next few days building a case. I contacted former employees who had been pushed out by Gordon, gathering their testimonies. I met with banking officials about the fraudulent loans in my name. I even reached out to Tyler, swallowing my pride, to ask what Gordon had promised him during our divorce. Through it all, Michael was my rock, offering support, resources, and the kind of unconditional love I'd been missing my entire adult life. We were making up for lost time, sharing meals and stories, getting to know each other as adults. He introduced me to his sister, my aunt I never knew I had, and showed me family photos of grandparents I'd never met. You look just like my mother, he told me one evening, showing me a picture of a smiling woman with my eyes and chin. She would have adored you. A week after the disastrous birthday dinner, I was reviewing documents in my apartment when someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find Paige standing there looking uncomfortable in jeans and a simple sweater rather than her usual carefully curated outfit. Can I come in? She asked quietly. I hesitated but stepped aside to let her enter. If you're here as Gordon's spy, you can save us both some time, I said, crossing my arms. Paige winced. I deserve that. I've been horrible to you, Annabelle. For years. She looked around my small apartment. This is nice. Cozy. What do you want, Paige? She sat down on my couch, shoulders slumped. I don't even know anymore. My whole life feels like it's built on lies. Dad, Gordon, he's been controlling everything for so long. I don't know who I am without his approval. Despite myself, I felt a pang of sympathy. Paige had been Gordon's puppet for as long as I could remember. Mom came to see me after she visited you, she continued. She showed me some of the evidence she's collected. I had no idea things were so bad. And then when I confronted Gordon about it, She paused, swallowing hard. What did he do? I asked sharply. He didn't hit me or anything, but he said if I didn't get with the program, he'd cut me off completely. No more allowance, no more paying for the kids' private school, no more country club membership. He said he'd make sure Scott's medical practice suffered too. And that surprised you. That's how Gordon operates. He uses money to control people. I know that now, Paige admitted. I guess I always knew, but I didn't want to see it. It was easier to be the favorite to play along. At my expense, I pointed out. Tears filled her eyes. Yes, and I'm sorry, Annabelle. Truly sorry. I was jealous of you. Jealous. Of me, you had everything. I had things. Material things. But you had something I never did. Independence. You built your own career, made your own choices. Even when things went wrong, you handled them on your own. I've never made a single decision without wondering what Gordon would think. We talked for hours. Really talked for perhaps the first time as adults. Paige revealed how Gordon had controlled every aspect of her life. From her choice of college to her husband, to how she raised her children. How he'd told her that I looked down on her, that I thought she was shallow and worthless. More of Gordon's manipulations designed to keep us at odds. By the time she left, we weren't exactly friends, but we had reached an understanding. Paige promised to support me at the emergency board meeting I was calling for the following week, where I planned to present the evidence of Gordon's financial misconduct. The day before the meeting, Gordon called me directly for the first time in years. Whatever you think you're doing, you need to stop, he said without preamble. Hello to you too, Gordon, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. You're playing a dangerous game, Annabelle. I've been patient with your little tantrum, but my patience has limits. Tantrum. Is that what you call exposing fraud and embezzlement? He laughed coldly. You always were a self-righteous little bitch. Just like your father. Look where it got him. Nowhere. You think anyone's going to believe your wild accusations? I've spent years building relationships with everyone who matters in this company, in this town. You're just the unstable daughter who couldn't even keep her marriage together. We'll see who they believe tomorrow, I replied and hung up. That night I barely slept, running through my presentation again and again in my mind. By morning I was exhausted but determined. Michael, Jake, and even Paige had promised to be there for support. My mother would attend too, ready to share her evidence. When I arrived at the Carter Enterprises conference room, I was surprised to see Tyler there sitting next to Gordon. My ex-husband looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes as I took my seat. Now that we're all here, Gordon began smoothly. I believe Tyler has something he'd like to share with the board. Tyler stood clearing his throat nervously. I've been working with Gordon to review some concerning financial patterns associated with Annabelle's accounts. We have reason to believe she's been diverting company resources for personal use. The accusation hung in the air. So this was Gordon's plan. Use my ex-husband to discredit me before I could present my evidence. That's an interesting claim, I said, calmly opening my laptop. Especially considering the documentation I have showing exactly who has been diverting company resources. I connected my computer to the projector and brought up the first of many spreadsheets, bank statements, and recorded conversations. For the next hour, I methodically laid out the evidence against Gordon. The embezzlement, the shell companies, the personal expenses charged to business accounts. I showed how he had systematically removed checks and balances from the company structure, how he had isolated and discredited anyone who questioned his authority. Tyler's face grew increasingly pale as the presentation continued. When I finished, Susan Palmer stood up. As legal counsel for this company, I recommend the board take immediate action to protect the company's interests. At minimum, Gordon should be suspended pending a full investigation. This is absurd, Gordon sputtered. Tyler, tell them about the evidence we discussed. All eyes turned to Tyler, who looked like he wanted to disappear. There is no evidence against Annabelle. Gordon told me to say those things. He promised to push through the partnership with my firm if I helped discredit her. Gordon lunged across the table at Tyler. You spineless coward. Two security guards who had been standing discreetly by the door stepped forward, restraining Gordon as the board voted overwhelmingly to suspend him and launch a full investigation. As we filed out of the conference room, Tyler approached me hesitantly. Annabelle, I'm sorry. For everything. Not just today, but everything. I looked at the man I had once loved, now just a stranger who had caused me pain. I'm not interested in your apology, Tyler. I've moved on. And for the first time, I realized it was true. I had moved on. The weeks following Gordon's suspension were a whirlwind of activity. An external accounting firm was brought in to conduct a full audit of Carter Enterprises. My mother filed for divorce and moved into a small condo, taking only her personal belongings and family heirlooms. Paige and I began the slow process of rebuilding a relationship, meeting for coffee once a week to talk honestly about our shared past and separate futures. Michael and I continued to strengthen our father-daughter bond. He introduced me to his side of the family, my Aunt Claire and her children, cousins I never knew I had. I learned that my grandmother on his side had left me a small inheritance that Gordon had somehow intercepted. The money wasn't life-changing, but the connection to my heritage was priceless. The audit revealed the full extent of Gordon's financial misconduct. He had been systematically siphoning funds for over a decade, using complex schemes to hide the money trail. The fraudulent loans in my name were just the latest in a pattern of identity theft and fraud that had begun years earlier. The evidence was damning enough that the board voted unanimously to terminate Gordon's employment and pursue legal charges. 3 months after that fateful birthday dinner, I found myself in the conference room again, but this time at the head of the table. The board had asked me to step in temporarily to help stabilize the company during the transition. My background in corporate marketing made me qualified to handle the public relations aspect of the crisis, and my Wilson name carried weight with longtime employees and clients. The quarterly reports show we've managed to stop the bleeding, I explained to the assembled board members and department heads. Client retention is at 85%, which is better than we projected considering the circumstances. And the Peterson account, asked Susan Palmer. Secured, I confirmed. They were wavering, but I met with them personally last week. The new transparency measures we've implemented went a long way toward reassuring them. After the meeting, Paige waited for me outside my new office. Formerly Gordon's space, now redecorated to remove all traces of his presence. That was impressive, she said as we walked toward the elevator. Grandma would be proud. Thanks, I replied, still getting used to receiving genuine compliments from my sister. How are things at home? Paige sighed. Scott's still processing everything. He built his whole identity around being Gordon Carter's son-in-law. Finding out the man he idolized is facing criminal charges has been difficult. And the kids, they miss their grandfather, but they're resilient. I've been taking them to see Mom more often, and they're excited to meet Michael next week. The elevator doors opened to reveal my mother, looking years younger in casual clothes with her hair in a simple bob rather than her usual elaborate style. Am I interrupting a sister moment? She asked with a tentative smile. Not at all, I assured her. We were just heading out to lunch. Join us. Over salads at a cafe near the office, my mother shared news about her therapy sessions and her volunteer work at a local women's shelter. I never realized how many women are in situations like mine was, she explained. Financially controlled, emotionally manipulated. It feels good to help them see a way out. Have you heard from Gordon, Paige? Asked. My mother shook her head. Not directly. His lawyer contacted mine about the divorce settlement. He's still denying everything, claiming he's the victim of a conspiracy. Classic Gordon, I said. He'll never admit he was wrong. The criminal investigation against Gordon was proceeding slowly but thoroughly. The district attorney had assured us they were building a solid case that would likely result in significant jail time. In the meantime, Gordon had been released on bail but was required to stay away from all family members and company properties. That evening, Michael came over for dinner at my apartment, now a weekly tradition. As we cooked together, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. "I got a call from the realtor today," Michael mentioned as he chopped vegetables. "The house I looked at last week is available if I want it. The one in Riverside. That's only 20 minutes from here," I noted. He nodded. "I thought it might be nice to be closer." "If that's okay with you." "More than okay," I assured him. "It would be wonderful to have you nearby." Over dinner, we discussed the upcoming Carter family reunion, the first one I'd been explicitly invited to in years. Jake was organizing it and had made it clear that Gordon was not welcome. "Are you ready for that?" Michael asked. Seeing everyone again under these circumstances, I considered the question carefully. I think so. It's time to reclaim my place in the family on my own terms. Besides, I'm curious to see how they'll all react now that the power dynamic has shifted. The reunion was being held at Jake's farm outside the city, neutral territory for a family in transition. As I pulled up to the sprawling property the following Saturday, I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. Jake greeted me with a warm hug. "Everyone's here," he whispered in my ear, "and they're all walking on eggshells waiting to see how you'll react to them." I laughed. "Let them squirm a little. It's good for the soul." The day was surprisingly pleasant. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins who had previously followed Gordon's lead in treating me as an outsider now approached with cautious friendliness. Some offered awkward apologies, others pretended the past had never happened, but all showed a new respect that felt both vindicating and slightly amusing. My mother moved through the gathering with a quiet dignity, accepting both criticism and support with grace. Paige stayed close to her children, but made an effort to introduce them properly to me, correcting their previous understanding that Aunt Annabelle doesn't like us. As evening approached, Jake called everyone together for a toast. "To family," he said, raising his glass. "The real kind. The ones who support you no matter what." I caught my mother's eye across the circle of relatives. She was crying silently, but for once they seemed like tears of relief rather than sadness. Later, as I was preparing to leave, Tyler appeared beside my car, clearly having waited for a private moment. "Annabelle," he began. "I know you said you're not interested in my apology, but I need you to know how sorry I am. For everything with Sarah, for letting Gordon influence me during our divorce, for what happened at the board meeting." I studied his face, once so beloved, now just familiar. "Why are you really here, Tyler? What do you want from me?" He looked down, then met my eyes directly. "A second chance. We were good together once. I made terrible mistakes, but I've changed. Sarah and I ended things months ago. I've been in therapy working on myself, and now that I'm running Carter Enterprises, suddenly I'm attractive again. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. It's not that he insisted. Seeing you stand up to Gordon, watching how you've handled everything, it reminded me of all the reasons I fell in love with you in the first place. Your strength, your integrity." For a brief moment, I allowed myself to remember the good times with Tyler, the laughter, the partnership, the dreams we'd shared. Then I remembered the betrayal, the lies, the years of pain. "I'm glad you're working on yourself, Tyler. That's important. But there's no second chance for us. That chapter of my life is closed." As I drove away, I felt no regret, no lingering attachment, just a clean certainty that I was moving forward, not back. 3 months later, I stood outside Le Chateau, taking a deep breath before entering. The last time I'd been here had changed my life, completely setting in motion events I could never have predicted. Tonight I was returning on my own terms for my own purpose. "Reservation for Wilson," I told the maitre d'. "Of course, Miss Wilson. Your guests have already arrived." I was led to a private dining room, different from the one where Gordon had humiliated me, thankfully. My mother stood as I entered, looking nervous but happy in a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes. "Annabelle, this is so thoughtful," she said, hugging me briefly. "Happy birthday, Mom," I replied, handing her a small wrapped package. A few months late, but better late than never. Around the table sat the people who had supported me through the upheaval of the past 6 months. Michael Page and her children, Jake and his fiancée, my Aunt Claire from Michael's side of the family. No Gordon, no pretense, no tension, just people who genuinely wanted to be there. I ordered champagne, Michael said, gesturing to the bottles chilling in ice buckets. The reasonably priced kind, not the ridiculous stuff Gordon always insisted on. Perfect, I laughed, taking my seat at the head of the table. The evening was everything my mother's original birthday dinner should have been. Warm, genuine, filled with conversation and laughter. My niece Emma Page's 7-year-old daughter peppered Michael with questions about what I was like as a child, delighted to hear stories about her aunt that didn't paint me as the family villain. Aunt Annabelle was afraid of thunderstorms until she was 10. Michael revealed, winking at me. She used to hide under her bed with her stuffed penguin. I still have that penguin, I admitted, much to Emma's delight. As dessert was served, a simple chocolate cake rather than Gordon's usual elaborate custom pastries, my mother opened her gift. Inside the small box was a silver bracelet similar to the one I'd brought to the original dinner but never got to give her. "It's beautiful," she said, voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Annabelle." "Read the engraving," I encouraged her. She turned the bracelet over to find the words, "It's never too late to begin again." "That's true for both of us," I said softly. After dinner, as everyone chatted over coffee, I quietly asked for the bill and paid it myself. A symbolic act that didn't go unnoticed by my mother or Michael. "You didn't have to do that," my mother whispered. "I wanted to," I replied. "This dinner this night, it's on my terms." Later, as we prepared to leave, Paige pulled me aside. "I have news," she said, a tentative smile playing at her lips. "I've applied to go back to school, to finish my business degree." "Paige, that's wonderful." "It's terrifying," she corrected with a nervous laugh. "I'm 31 with 2 kids starting over. But watching you rebuild your life these past months made me realize it's possible." "You'll be amazing," I assured her, meaning it. The legal proceedings against Gordon had continued to advance. He had been indicted on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. His lawyer had approached us about a plea deal, but the district attorney was confident in the case and recommended we proceed to trial. Gordon's reputation was in tatters, his carefully constructed image of the successful businessman and family man completely destroyed. My temporary position at Carter Enterprises had evolved into something more permanent. The board had been impressed with my leadership during the crisis and officially offered me the role of Chief Marketing Officer, with the possibility of greater responsibility in the future. Martha always said the company should stay in Wilson hands. Susan Palmer had told me when extending the offer, "She'd be pleased to see you taking your rightful place." My relationship with Michael continued to strengthen. We made up for lost time with weekend trips, long conversations about everything and nothing, and a growing comfort in our restored father-daughter bond. He had purchased the house in Riverside and invited us all for dinner each Sunday, a new family tradition that felt both novel and somehow ancient, as if we were simply resuming something that had been temporarily interrupted. My mother, too, was finding her footing in her new independence. The divorce proceedings moved forward with Gordon fighting every step but ultimately losing ground, as more evidence of his financial misconduct came to light. She had begun dating again, cautiously, tentatively, and had joined a book club and a hiking group, building a social circle separate from the one Gordon had controlled. As we left the restaurant that night, I found myself walking beside my mother toward the parking lot. "I never properly apologized to you," she said suddenly, stopping under a streetlight. "For not protecting you from Gordon. For choosing his approval over your well-being. For staying silent that night at dinner. Mom, no, please. Let me say this." She took a deep breath. "I failed you, Annabelle. As a mother, as a role model. I showed you it was acceptable to be diminished, to be silenced. I am so deeply sorry for that." I looked at this woman who had been both a source of pain and a victim herself, and felt the last of my resentment fade away. "I forgive you, Mom. We both did the best we could in a situation Gordon deliberately made impossible." "You did better than I did," she said with a sad smile. "You fought back. You refused to be erased. It's never too late to begin again," I reminded her, echoing the bracelet's message. 6 months to the day after Gordon pointed at me and declared I didn't belong, I sat in a courtroom watching as he was sentenced to 8 years in prison for his crimes. He never once looked in my direction, maintaining his denial to the end. I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a quiet certainty that justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked how I felt about the verdict. My focus is on the future, I told them. On rebuilding what was damaged and creating something stronger. That evening, I hosted a dinner at my new house. A modest but comfortable home I'd purchased with my legitimate inheritance and my CMO salary. Around my table sat my reconstructed family, biological and chosen, related by blood and by experience. We toasted not to Gordon's downfall, but to our collective resilience. Later, after everyone had left, I sat on my back porch, looking at the stars, reflecting on how much had changed in half a year. From being labeled an unwelcome guest at my mother's birthday dinner to creating my own home where everyone was welcome. From being financially compromised by divorce to achieving professional success on my own merits. From feeling isolated and rejected to building genuine connections based on mutual respect. Family isn't defined by whose name you carry or whose table you're allowed to sit at. Real family consists of the people who see your value, who stand with you in difficult times, who celebrate your victories as their own. Sometimes you're born into that kind of family, sometimes you find them, and sometimes, like me, you have to create it for yourself by having the courage to walk away from a table where you're not respected. I no longer questioned whether I belonged. I had learned to create spaces where I and everyone I cared about could belong together. Not by force or manipulation, but through genuine love and respect. That was the true inheritance my grandmother and my biological father had tried to give me all along. Not shares in a company or financial security, but the strength to stand on my own and the wisdom to know my own worth. Have you ever had to walk away from a situation where you weren't valued, even when it meant leaving behind people you cared about? Sometimes the hardest part of self-respect is being willing to remove yourself from places where you're treated as less than you deserve. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below, sharing your experience. And if you enjoyed this journey of rediscovery and standing up for yourself, please like this video, subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over adversity, and share with someone who might need to hear that they too deserve a seat at the dude table. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you always belong exactly where you choose to stand.